Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for making time out of your day to participate in this really what's an exchange of ideas. I really appreciate the organizers for not only putting this event in a time where the sharing of ideas that are informed is so rare, where there's not a lot of people listening to all of the noise, for really creating this space for us to share what are things that we're passionate about and things that we see as being important for shaping the future. What I want to talk about today is the topic is envisioning a more just future and how we can work together to develop our capacity to enact social justice moving forward. I have the privilege of having the best job of the world of being a faculty member at the University of San Francisco in the School of Education, where we have an explicit mission, it's in our mission statement, to center social justice in our work. I have brilliant colleagues who are some of the leading minds, leading activists, community organizers in the nation. But the best part of my job are my students. So my students come into this space with a passion about the world. They want to see social justice. They've lived social injustice. And they are committed, they're devoting their lives, being paid not very much to live in the Bay Area, but to teach young minds, to organize as activists, as educators, to really try to work towards a better world. And when I think about what can shape the future, I take hope and inspiration from them who are committed to it and living it every day. Well, before I share some of the things that I've learned from them, I want to make sure that we are on the same page about what social justice is. Social justice has become a bit of a buzzword in certain circles. It's been appropriated in a lot of ways to take on different meanings. So I want us to be on the same page about what I mean about it and how I define it before we move forward. And to do so, I want to break down just the two different parts of the phrase social justice. And first, by thinking about the concept of justice. When we think of justice, we think it really carries within our society this individual notion that justice is something that's mine. It's something that I can hold. It's something that if I have it, maybe that means someone else can't have it. And it means that it can be taken away from me, right? It manifests within the criminal justice system, right? Where justice looks like 2.3 million people being incarcerated currently, that's the size, 3 times the size of my hometown of Miami, plus my current home of Oakland combined, 3 times that population are currently in our nation's jails and prisons, some without trial, some for the rest of their lives. Many will be released and not be able to find employment after. That's how justice manifests through this system, right? And it's not all bad for the lawyers and people who work to uphold justice in society. Much appreciation, and there's a lot of hard work in this. But we're centering on issues of oppression and what that looks like. So once we go from justice on its own and we combine the social, what this does is it takes something that's tangible, something that's zero sum, and it makes it infinite. It centers our humanity, it centers our connections as people, our connections within a society, right? That we have this contract to one another to uphold justice, not just for me, but for you and for everyone in this room, everyone in video, right? Everyone around us. And it makes us think about the many ways that injustices are allowed to perpetuate. It sounds cliche, but we need social justice now more than ever. Right? Last year, 300,000 children's bodies were sold for profit in this country. In this country, Black Americans, unarmed Black Americans, are 2 times more likely to be shot and killed by police officers than white Americans. Native women are murdered at 10 times the rate of the national average. Right? So holding ourselves accountable, to what extent is justice manifesting socially, right? We see these injustices around us. Income-wise, 1% of our nation contains more wealth than 90% of our nation. This isn't justice, right? We're struggling. And so while it might be easy to celebrate the strides that we've made, we also need to be holding ourselves accountable to the ways that these injustices have been allowed to be normalized. it's normal that children are kidnapped from their homes and their bodies are sold on the streets. It's normal that Native women are murdered. This is normal. If we understand what normal means, it's common. And you would think, well, surely our nation's leadership doesn't know about this. You would think surely that the people who are upholding justice in society don't know about this. That if our president knew that children were being kidnapped from their homes and their bodies sold in the streets, that he would go into a Twitter frenzy to try to rally everyone to really make a difference, right? To really change this. But these things don't happen, and there's a lot of reasons why. We hold these ideologies about who we are as a nation, a collective identity. Things like, if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can succeed. First of all, it's physically impossible to lift yourself up by your bootstraps. I had to Google what bootstraps were and kind of the mechanics of what that is. But it is physically impossible. But this has been the shining beacon for our country, right? And why so many people risk their lives to come to the United States. It's also the justification for saying, well, I worked hard and I got to where I am, and you're at the certain place where you are currently, so you must not have worked hard, and this must be your fault. It allows us to individualize injustice versus thinking about injustice to individuals as being something that our society has created and perpetuates. And individually, we also have these psychological barriers that make it hard to challenge these ideologies like meritocracy. We have this thing inside of us that makes us want everything to be the same, right? It makes us want to have parity in all of our beliefs. When that doesn't happen, we face what's called cognitive dissonance. The experience of cognitive dissonance, which is when you take in a belief that challenges something that you hold dear, that feeling of discomfort is as strong as thirst. It's the same feeling as being sitting in your car in LA traffic on a hot day when your AC has broken down and you're sitting in the heat and you have nothing to drink. If you can center in that feeling, we go through that emotionally and possibly don't even realize it. And so when we get this information that challenges what we hold dear, we need to alleviate it. We need that cup of water. We need lemonade or Gatorade or whatever your beverage of choice to address your thirst, which might take the form of reducing the importance of these new beliefs and attitudes. Like, well, I live in a safe neighborhood. I've worked really hard, so my children are safe, right? So I can just reduce the importance of this new information. Can challenge these beliefs that we just acquired and say, well, actually, your facts aren't true. What's your N, right? And for the statisticians in the room, we can try to bring in this series of different facts that might better support our claims, right? More comforting lies, like the image suggests. Or we can change one or more of our attitudes or beliefs. We can do the hard work that it takes to challenge what we think we know and expand it, and to really understand the world differently. It's really hard to do. It doesn't happen all the time. So what do we do instead? So instead, we might celebrate single instances and say, well, police brutality isn't a thing. Look, there was this officer who was giving out ice cream cones in this one town near Ferguson where, there were large riots around police brutality. So that must discredit what happened. Or we'll use alternative ideas to help justify the things that we already believe, right? Which there's infinite ways that in the age of the internet, back in the day, for those of you in the room who might not remember, there used to be these things called encyclopedias, where if you had a question, you had to look it up. And that went through some sort of verification process. Now on the internet, knowledge is freely shared and distributed, which is positive in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways presents these alternative facts mechanisms where we can draw from different sources of knowledge to justify our own beliefs conveniently. Or we become internet trolls, losing, many family members have been lost in these past 2 years in particular because of trolling on the internet, because of vicious, if you ever want to lose faith in humanity, read the comments section on almost anything that's posted online. So these are the ways that we engage instead of doing this difficult work that it takes to change our ideas, to expand our ideas, to engage in the dissonance and the understanding that we need to be able to recognize the humanity in one another and enact social justice. So when we don't seek to understand and instead we seek to defend our own ideas, what happens is that the burden of justifying the humanity of large groups within society fall onto those who've been most marginalized. It falls on to the one student in the classroom to speak to a marginalized experience. It falls on activists risking their lives to just say to the world, Black lives matter. And you need to recognize this as a system. It unfairly puts that burden, and then as a society, we normalize ignoring it. We normalize not implementing the changes that are needed to enact justice more broadly, more socially. We engage in acts of violence to justify why it is that people shouldn't be heard. We allow these tensions to manifest within the spaces that we control. So I don't want to end on the doom and gloom, right? Because there are ways that we can work better. And this is one small way that I'm challenging all of you to think about. When you feel that feeling of thirst, when you are walking down the street and there's a group of activists voicing about a particular issue that challenges what you hold dear, engage in that dissonance, sit in that discomfort. Sit in the feeling that maybe what I know about the world can be expanded, and maybe what I know about the world is wrong. Maybe it's true for me, and I need to reflect on the privileges that have allowed that truth to be real for me. And instead, let me sit in it, let me work on it, let me reach out and expand myself in ways that I can. And once you're good in that process of self-discovery, how about reaching out to others to engage with them, to support them in their own dissonance? It's very easy to get really frustrated with people, and the burden of making other people understand does fall on certain people disproportionately. But I'm challenging you to engage in that process of bringing others to sit in that discomfort. Engage in it. Don't run away from difficult conversations. Don't guise it under wanting to be polite, right? But having that hard conversation with others. The second takeaway is I want you to engage in critical thinking. This is an institution that prides itself in being a source of critical thinking. But don't just think critically and, so what questions do you have? But what questions do you have about the oppressive structures that surround us? In what ways are you thinking about the assumptions we make about the world that could be disserving groups of people disproportionately? Engage in these really important ways of questioning the world around us, centered on understanding power, understanding privilege, understanding oppression. And so what I was hoping to talk about is that social justice is not some finish line that we're all going to cross together holding hands in a we are the world moment. Because the moment we achieve one triumph in the right of civil rights and social justice, there's another one that we've been systematically blinded to. And so we need to think about social justice not as a finish line, but as a process, as something that everyone needs to be engaged in, everyone needs to be continuously engaged in, and that we need to work better together to achieve. Thank you very much.